During this season at church, you hear a lot about resources. Maybe you hear about time. Maybe you hear about energy. Maybe you hear for sure about money. But I want to talk about something that you've never heard anyone talk about during a season of generosity, or what a lot of churches call stewardship. Something that we have a lot of, that has tremendous value, but that we devalue in the way we think about it. We think about it as something we don't have a lot of. We think that there's scarcity. And what little we have, we think it's not of really a lot of value. And I want to challenge all that. I want to say that you have a lot of misconceptions about this. That, in fact, you have a lot of this resource, and it's more valuable maybe than any other resource that you have. And it's the power that you have to influence other people, specifically with encouragement. It's a powerful thing that you've probably never thought about. How can you be a steward of that? How can you manage it? God's given you this resource. How can I use it and steward it and be wise in how I spend it to affect other people? Because those other people will affect other people, and those people will affect other people. And the people you influence and the people you encourage, you know what? At night, they go home, and the way you've affected them affects how they interact with their families. If you supervise people, be aware of that. But also, if you just have peers at work, the way you interact with them affects the way they interact with their children and their families. Wow. It's a powerful thing. In the early church, encouragement was something that Paul talked about a lot. Because think about the context of the early church. They were persecuted. They were countercultural. They were a minority that had the hostility of the majority turned against them. They didn't have big buildings to worship in. They didn't have this book as a guide. They didn't have ordained clergy standing up with nice microphones and projection. They met in people's homes, typically secretly. So many things were going against them. They truly were trying to swim upstream. So Paul talked a lot about encouragement. And this morning, I want to start by looking at some of the things that he shared in talking about encouragement, so that we can think a little bit differently maybe about how encouragement is a role and a task that we have as believers. If you have your Bible, I want you to open up to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. We're going to turn the lights up a little bit so that you can read along with me. 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11. Towards the end of the chapter, if any of you watch college football, as I'm apt to do, you imagine and think about sometimes, well, what did he say in the locker room to get them so fired up? I think about this last chapter of Thessalonians as Paul's locker room speech. He's Newt Rockney, and they're down by 7. He's got to get them fired up to go out and to share the good news of Jesus Christ and what they say and what they do. But think about the emphasis that he places on encouragement. Something, again, I'm going to say it again, that you devalue. You don't think you have a lot of influence. You don't think it has a lot of value or power. You're wrong. Paul says this, "Therefore, encourage one another and build up each other as indeed you are doing." Those two things go together. Encourage one another. And what's the result of that? And build up each other, indeed, as you are doing. But we appeal to you, brothers and sisters, to respect those who labor among you and have charge of you in the Lord and admonish you. Esteem them very highly in love because of their work. Here's the locker room speech. He's going to give them some instructions as they go out. Be at peace among yourselves. We urge you, beloved, to admonish the idlers. Encourage the faint-hearted. There's that word again. To the weak, be patient with all of them. See that none of you repays evil for evil, but always seek to do good and to one another and to all. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, give thanks in all circumstances, because you're in a tough circumstance. They know that. He knows that they know that. They're in a tough spot. But he's saying put your attention not on what's going wrong, but on God, so that you can give thanks in all circumstances, because that'll change your spirit. For this is the will of God in Christ Jesus for you. Do not quench the Spirit. I think that's his way of saying don't be negative. Don't tear people down. Don't only look at what's wrong with people, what's wrong with the situation. Don't be a complainer. Don't be a whiner. Don't be so critical of people. Don't quench the Spirit of God in people. Do not despise the words of prophets, but test everything. Hold fast to what is good, abstain from every form of evil. And similar to that, I want you to turn over just a little bit further into Hebrews chapter 10, 2 short verses that are some brilliant, brilliant psychology. Hebrews 10, verse 24 says this: let's consider, let's ponder how to provoke one another to love and good deeds. When I read that this week, I was thinking about Rise Against Hunger, and that some people in our church decided they were going to provoke us to love and good deeds. And so they set up this event called Rise Against Hunger. And they told me, Wade, announce it again and again and again. Send out emails, send out text messages. Let's provoke one another to love and good deeds. We do some provoking at my house, but it's not always to love and good deeds, all right? Does anybody at your house provoke each other? A lot. Well, this is a little bit different. This is like encouraging and pushing and inspiring people to do something for someone else. Let's ponder, let's reflect on, let's consider and contemplate how to provoke one another to love and good deeds. Now, the writer here is anticipating that the audience said, okay, well, how do we do that? So he goes ahead and answers it. It says, well, we don't neglect to meet together because it's pretty dang hard to encourage someone if they're not there. That's why it's so important for us to gather in community. We're out of town, great, listen to it online. But if we're in town, to be here, it's hard for you to encourage me and me to encourage you if I don't see you. It's hard for me to hug your neck or for you to hug mine or pat me on the back or me to pat you on the back. It's hard for me to tell you what I see God at work in your life doing or the beauty I see in you or the gifts that you have or to bless you if I don't even see you. So he's posing a question and then answering it. Let's consider how to provoke one another. Well, first, let's get together. Not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but if we're together, we can encourage one another. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Encouragement is a big deal. And we need to think of it as a resource that we can steward so that we can be people who change the world. Our mission statement as a church talks about transforming the world. And you may think, well, in my job, I'm not transforming the world. I'm just selling this, or I'm fixing this, or I'm working on this for people. But the interactions you have with people are a way that you can change people you'll never meet. And through the people you never meet, that you affect countless other people. I've never heard this put better than by someone who I consider a hero and someone I look up to and admire, Admiral William H. McRaven, who after 30 years of his career as a Navy SEAL went on to be the head of all Navy SEAL forces, then over all NATO Special Forces Command, and then the designer and overseer of something called Operation Neptune Spear, which you may have never heard of, but you know by this name, the operation that got Osama bin Laden. He designed it, he supervised it. A great American. In his commencement address to the University of Texas, his alma mater, he made it clear for you and for me that our influence on other people, our decision to be encouragers of other people, can definitely change the world. Take a look.
So the university's slogan is, what starts here changes the world. Well, I've got to admit, I kind of like it. What starts here changes the world. Tonight, there are almost 8,000 students, or there are more than 8,000 students graduated from UT. So that great paragon of analytical rigor, Ask.com, says that the average American will meet 10,000 people in their lifetime. 10,000 people, that's a lot of folks. But if every one of you changed the lives of just 10 people, and each one of those people changed the lives of another 10 people, and another 10, then in 5 generations, 125 years, the class of 2014 will have changed the lives of 800 million people. 800 million people. Think about it. Over twice the population of the United States. Go one more generation, and you can change the entire population of the world, 8 billion people. If you think it's hard to change the lives of 10 people, change their lives forever, you're wrong. I saw it happen every day in Iraq and Afghanistan. A young Army officer makes a decision to go left instead of right down a road in Baghdad, and the 10 soldiers with him are saved from a close-in ambush. In Kandahar province, Afghanistan, a non-commissioned officer from the female engagement team senses that something isn't right and directs the infantry platoon away from a 500-pound IED, saving the lives of a dozen soldiers. But if you think about it, not only were those soldiers saved by the decisions of one person, but their children were saved, and their children's children. Generations were saved by one decision, one person. But changing the world can happen anywhere, and anyone can do it. So what starts here can indeed change the world. But the question is, what will the world look like after you change it? Well, I'm confident that it will look much, much better. But if you'll humor this old sailor for just a moment, I have a few suggestions that may help you on your way to a better world. And while these lessons were learned during my time in the military, I can assure you that it matters not whether you ever served a day in uniform. It matters not your gender, your ethnic or religious background, your orientation, or your social status. Our struggles in this world are similar, and the lessons to overcome those struggles and to move forward, changing ourselves and changing the world around us, will apply equally to all.
If you haven't heard the full commencement address that he gives to the University of Texas, I highly recommend it to you. As a true American hero and just an incredible leader and role model, Admiral McRaven makes it really clear the power that each of us have, military, civilian, old, young, whatever it may be, man, woman, to influence and impact other people in powerful ways. It wasn't until I was watching this again that I remembered being a young pastor, a real idiot in a lot of ways, right out of seminary, not knowing almost anything, and noticing a guy who was attending school in college and was planning on going to Auburn for a graduate degree in construction sciences. And I remember seeing something in this young guy and just thinking, man, there's something unique about this guy. And I invited him to kind of turn his back on that career path and to instead come and work with me at a church. And it was just something I saw in him. And I look back on that now that he's been in youth ministry for 20 years and how he has touched the lives of more people than I can ever count. And other than our current youth pastor, Stephen Ingram, is the greatest youth pastor I've ever met. I think about how anyone, even that dumb 25-year-old super green pastor, can have a conversation with someone that changes their direction in life. And you are the person who can have that conversation. But there's some misconceptions that you have, and you do have them, that keep you from using that power, much less using it wisely. And I just want to hit 3 of those misconceptions that you have. And you have at least 2 of these, but I bet you probably have 3 of them. The first of which is, well, I can't change someone else's mind. Hey, I understand why you would think that. In the political environment that we live in a country that's this divided among political lines and partisan lines, I can imagine how you would think, well, I can't change this person's mind. I want to tell you that's wrong. You can change their mind because you can change what's on their mind. Just by what you say, just by the look on your face, just by the way you interact with someone, you can change their mind by changing what's on their mind, changing what they're thinking about, helping them to see the good in themselves that they may not see without what you might say. Well, you're thinking they see good things in themselves. They probably grew up like I did. Maybe you grew up in a great home where you were told every day that your parents were proud of you and you were told that you were loved. You were told that you were guilty. Let me tell you, most people don't grow up in a house like that. I don't care how nice their car is, how nice their house is, how perfect their hair or makeup is, the smile on their face, their teeth. Behind all of that is a world of negative, self-negating, critical thoughts that most people experience from trauma in their childhood or not growing up like that. So don't think because you feel positive about yourself that everyone else does. They don't. Your neighbor, your coworker, your friend, your extended family member, Someone sitting near you at church who you've never gone over to and introduced yourself, or even said, hey, I like that dress, or I like that jacket, or I see you here every Sunday and I love seeing you here. It encourages me to be here because I know you're going to be here and you always sit in the same place, and so do I. I know who you are out there. And by I know who you are, I mean all of you. It's a powerful thing when we realize that we can have tremendous influence on people's minds. Think about it. Someone comes up to you and you're thinking about what you didn't get done that morning, and you're thinking about, I look terrible today, or you're thinking, man, I'll never make it through the day. And that person comes up to you and says, hey, yesterday, you probably didn't realize it, but you were so nice to me. You came over to my desk and you thanked me for something, and you told me that you thought I was really good at this, and you changed my day. You didn't even realize it, but you changed my day. I just want to thank you. Having you work here makes this whole place better. Well, suddenly you're not where you were in your mind because they took you to a different place. They changed your mind because they changed what was on your mind. I've heard it said that the best exercise of all is reaching down to pull someone else up, because they get stronger and so do you. They get stronger because now they have hope. Now they've got a little lift, a second chance. They also see that they're not alone. You get stronger because you see the impact that you can have on someone else so easily. A sentence, a paragraph, a word. So easily able to change someone's mind and their perspective on themselves. And don't forget this, when you change their mind and how they feel, you change the way they're going to interact with other people. People like their children. People like their spouse. You influence people that you'll never even meet. You can change someone's mind by changing what is on their mind, by encouraging them. Another misconception is, well, people just brush off compliments. They're not going to notice. It's not going to make an impact. Let me ask you this question. When someone comes to you and says something thoughtful where you can see that they appreciate you, and you tell them the impact that they've had in some way, do you brush that off? You may not know how to respond. You may say, oh, shucks, and kick the dirt and all that sort of thing. But does it affect your day? Of course it does. You know why? They interacted with you, and after that interaction, you weren't where you were, and you weren't down here, you were up here. You felt better about yourself. It has an impact. Beyond that, it models a way of living for other people. I like to call that way of living this: we're blessed to be a blessing. We're blessed to be a blessing. Repeat that after me. We're blessed to be a blessing. One more time. We're blessed to be a blessing. Now, that phrase seems obvious in its meaning, but I had it wrong most of my life. I didn't realize what it meant. Maybe you don't realize what it meant. What I thought of it was kind of like this transactional deal where God's going to bless me so that I can then go forth to bless other people. Maybe that's kind of level one of what that means. It wasn't until later that I began realizing that, no, that's not what that means. What it means is that when I bless someone else, I am blessed. I'm blessed by being a blessing. I'm blessed to get to be a blessing to someone else. That the way I bless someone, the way I encourage someone, the way I help someone affects me too. It affects the way I think about myself because I see myself as someone who's impacting other people. And don't you want to see that in yourself? Don't you want to see that you're making a difference in other people's lives? I go to more funerals than most people. The saddest funeral of all, it's not because someone died. We're all going to die. It's when someone dies and nobody gets up and says, my life was better because of that person. That's a sad funeral. I've been to funerals like that, and I wanted to cry, not because the person died, but because it was a life of insignificance. A life that did not make the world a better place. No one could get up there and say how their life was better, improved, encouraged by this person. I don't want to be that person. I want it to be, we don't have enough time to get these people up here. I know you would like that. that you've touched so many lives. You don't have to invent the light bulb. You don't have to be a billionaire. You don't have to have a pilot's license. You don't have to be the fastest runner in the world or win a beauty prize. You just have to care to take the time to leave fingerprints of faith on people. That you touch them and your faith touches them, you encourage them, you build them up. You're not a negative influence, leading them into temptation, encouraging them to do wrong, being a part of something negative. No. Rather, you're lifting them up and pointing them to something better about God or something better about themselves. Your fingerprints of faith certainly do leave people more here or more there. They always make a difference. The third misconception is this. We've all thought it. We may not have said it out loud, but I think we've all thought it. We encounter people who are struggling. We see people who are, last week we talked about when we see people around town who seem to be hungry or homeless. But it's not just that obvious thing. We see people who are struggling, and maybe we think this, I don't have the energy to care for all these people. I got to take care of my kids. I got aging parents. I got people at work I got to be thinking about. I'm barely hanging on myself. I'm just trying to make it myself. We don't say that out loud, but we think it, and maybe we think then that, well, since I'm barely hanging on, I can't help someone else who's barely hanging on. And man, that's totally wrong. A story that Admiral McRaven tells about this week of training at the end of SEAL training, and pardon the expression, but he calls it Hell Week because I think they imagine that to be what hell is like. And in their training, one of those days, they go down to Tijuana, of all places, and experience something horrible. But he learned a lesson in it about how we don't have to be in some high and mighty place of success or everything going hunky-dory to be able to help other people. Take a listen.
The 9th week of training is referred to as Hell Week. It is 6 days of no sleep, constant physical and mental harassment, and one special day at the Mud Flats. The Mud Flats are an area between San Diego and Tijuana where the water runs off and creates the Tijuana Sloughs, a swampy patch of terrain where the mud will engulf you. It is on Wednesday of Hell Week that you paddle down to the Mud Flats and spend the next 15 hours trying to survive this freezing cold, the howling wind, and the incessant pressure to quit from the instructors. As the sun began to set that Wednesday evening, my training class, having committed some egregious infraction of the rules, was ordered into the mud. The mud consumed each man till there was nothing visible but our heads. The instructors told us we could leave the mud if only 5 men would quit. Only 5 men, just 5 men, and we could get out of the oppressive cold. Looking around the mud flat, it was apparent that some students were about to give up. It was still over 8 hours till the sun came up. 8 more hours of bone-chilling cold. The chattering teeth and the shivering moans of the trainees were so loud, it was hard to hear anything. And then one voice began to echo through the night. One voice raised in song. The song was terribly out of tune, but sung with great enthusiasm. One voice became 2, and 2 became 3, and before long, everyone in the class was singing. The instructors threatened us with more time in the mud if we kept up the singing, but the singing persisted. And somehow the mud seemed a little warmer, and the wind a little tamer, and the dawn not so far away. If I have learned anything in my time traveling the world, it is the power of hope. The power of one person, a Washington, a Lincoln, King, Mandela, and even a young girl from Pakistan, Malala. One person can change the world by giving people hope. So if you want to change the world, start singing when you're up to your neck in mud.
The guy who started that singing was buried up to his neck in freezing cold mud to where he couldn't even hardly move his arms, was hypothermic, and wasn't the strongest guy, but was the guy who was about to quit and began to sing to encourage other people and discovered what you'll discover, That you don't have to have your body above the mud, as it were, in life, above the waves, above the storms, to be able to impact other people. No. Whatever you're going through, there's someone going through something much worse. Or there's people going through the same thing, and that if you will allow yourself to encourage them, you will feel that same encouragement wash back over you. That by encouraging others, we're encouraged. Here's a better way of putting it, but I love this quote. It inspires me every day. We rise by lifting others. We rise by lifting others. It shows us the power that we have. And maybe more than that, it takes our minds off our own suffering. I remember working with a group of men in Nashville who had just gotten out of prison, and they were at a halfway house, and someone recruited me to go and teach a Bible study to these guys. And a lot of these guys had been in prison, out of prison, in prison, out of prison. Here I was, this young nincompoop from North Alabama, who was coming in there to kind of teach them about the world, the real world. And I was talking to these guys, and a flash came over me that had to be the Holy Spirit. And I said to them, you guys, think about probably yourself as being in a really bad situation here. Ever how many times you've been in prison? Yes, absolutely. No one there was thinking they were real world beaters, okay? They had a sense of reality. I said, let me ask you this. Is there someone you know in your personal life who has it even worse than you? Took a minute. Before long, every hand went up. A man said, my mom has pancreatic cancer. Another one said, my niece got hit by a car last month. We think she's going to be paralyzed. Before you know it, these guys who were all tough as nails and could have snapped me like a little twig were sharing these stories. And then I followed up on saying, in all those situations, is there any way where you think you could have a positive impact on them and help them? A phone call, going to the grocery store. You may not realize it, but there are people that you can touch and help. And I could feel the sense of pride in the room as they realized, they could have a positive impact on someone that they cared about. But maybe they just didn't see it up to that point that they could have that impact. All of us can have that impact, and that when we do, it impacts us as well. How do we do that? How do we make that something that's a way of living, not a Sunday sermon that goes in here and out the other? How do we make that a way of being in the world because we want the world to be like that? Well, we're good stewards of that resource. We're intentional. For me, that means putting it on my calendar because anything important's on there. If it's a birthday, if it's a meeting, if it's an anniversary, it better be on there, right? Anything, if I got to go to the doctor, if the boys have a thing at school, it's on there. Anything that's important to me is on there. Is it important to me to be an encourager and a blesser of other people? Of course it is. Is it important to me enough to write it on the mirror? Is it important enough to me to say, Wade, you know what? I'm going to encourage someone in a meaningful way 5 times a week, and I'm going to make a mark in my calendar every time I do that because I want to be a person that makes other people better. Because when they feel better in their mind and are better, they go home and they're a better husband, and they're a better wife, and they're a better parent, and they're a better coworker or boss because I help them be better by changing what's on their mind. If you want to be an encourager, have a plan. If it's important to you, there's a plan. If it matters, it's on the calendar where we decide we will steward our influence by encouraging. You have that power. You have that power to change someone's mind by changing what's on their mind. Know it. What a powerful resource and gift that is. Use it, steward it for good. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit.